Training as a tool is one of the biggest vehicles for growth. It's when stacked up and aligned with what you actually want and you're trying to achieve in life is such a vehicle of growth. It is such a positive impact in a lot of people's lives. Now, for me, I think motivation is something that I am a little resistant to. Not because I don't like essentially the ethos of what motivation is. I just think motivation is a transient thing. I think when we look at training, we need to be looking at the lifestyle. We need to be looking at our values, what we want to be true, and reverse engineer it. So when I look at training, a question that I'm asking more and more people now is like, what do you value? What is true for you? What do you want to get out of it in life, outside of training, so that we can make sure that your training actually aligns with that. Now, if you want to be a competitive sports person, epic. We'll align your training to work for that. If you want to be someone that uses training as a vehicle to de-stress, excellent. We can make sure that your training aligns with that. You can see here that, what we should be doing is aligning our output, what we do in the gym, with our life, with our goals, with everything in between. I think sometimes if we let training, it actually can be the opposite. It actually can work against us a little bit. It can take away from our day-to-day. And I think sometimes as a lifter, as someone in the gym, we might not even realize that this has happened. Now, an example around this is, say for instance, you were a very competitive sports person, and say the competitiveness has kind of died off a little bit. You're still into sport, you're still doing the thing, let's say powerlifting, but your training hasn't changed. So you're training as if you're a competitive powerlifter, but your training is exactly the same. Now, yeah, the bread and butter of every training program should be strength, building muscle, and everything in between. But there's a risk tolerance that's a lot higher. There's a lot more work that's required. So maybe we need to look at now that you're past that competitive stage and go, how do we rejig this a little bit? So you still get enjoyment from your training, you're still progressing year to year, but you're doing it that's now more so aligned with your actual goals and your visions for what you want for yourself. I was actually having a very interesting conversation with one of my my physio clients the other day, and we were talking about different styles of training, and, all of us have, normally dabbled with different styles of training, like strength training, more power-based training, speed training, athletics as a younger kid. And a lot of people sort of end up being in strength training and building muscle mass because it is the thing that we need to do. And this particular client was saying how they got into running and they were running a lot. Like they were ticking up, I think, say 50, 60, 70 Ks a week. Now, anyone that runs knows that that's actually quite a big time commitment. It's a huge time commitment, week in, week out, and you're obviously splitting that up across a week. But you've also got training, you've got work, you've got relationships, you've got all these other aspects of your life that you're trying to juggle. Now, this particular person stopped running altogether. I think it was for a week or for 2 weeks, and then had this realization that they just had so much more energy. They had so much more focus and bandwidth for life, for work, for everything else they were doing. And they're like, there is no way that I'm going back to that other style of training. I'm not introducing that amount of, aerobic fitness back into my life because, quite frankly, now sort of stepping back for a couple of weeks and going, wow, I was wasting so much energy on that. It was taking so much away from my productivity. So I think sometimes as well, we just, we continue to do what we've always done. We do what we're comfortable with. And, there's a certain element of identity in the way that we train. There's a certain amount of identity in the things that we do. So when we have a look at actual training itself, we need to also just be mindful that, where you are now versus where you are in 5 years' time actually may be a very different thing in terms of how much time you're committing, your energy, your effort, and what you're trying to get out of it. And I think that's something that needs to be adaptable. I've seen many people train, and they seem to be injured every other day of the week, tearing something or, having a shoulder issue or having a knee issue. And you're just like, maybe it's time to realign your training a little bit with where you're at in life. That can be a bit of like I said, an identity shift or a bit of a hard pill to swallow. But the reality is sometimes pushing things uphill ain't the best pathway. So, for me, I think training hard in general is always going to be the goal. Training in a way that, builds muscle, builds strength, builds aerobic fitness, allows me to be mobile and capable is always going to be a goal. But, you can push up at periods of time and you can pull back. And, the changes you make week to week doesn't have to be a forever thing. You may have, say for instance, your hospitality in terms of work. September through to January might just be absolutely crazy months for you, like crazy busy. So it's unrealistic, or it's probably not that helpful to have, the heaviest period of training or the most voluminous training period over those months. So if we look at your year and you go, well, those months are really busy for me, just don't align the biggest goals within those months. Make sure that you're kind of looking at your year as a whole and going, well, where do I want to work harder and where do I not want to work as hard? Like, where can I do a bit more recovery, structural balance, and work on other aspects of my training where I'm sort of in and out of the gym quicker. It's a big consideration to take in. But I think sometimes we just get stuck doing training because, one, we've always done it in a certain way, or two, everyone else around us are training in a particular way. Now, if you look at, say, the fitness industry, the entry-level point for most people to get into training is semi-private, is classes and group-based gyms. Affordability, access, coaching, everything in between. It makes sense on paper. But a lot of people will grow out of that really quickly. They want more. They want to be, pushing harder in terms of they actually get a return on their investment. And quite frankly, a lot of these training programs can only take people to a certain level, right? So you're going to have to step outside of your comfort zone to look for a little bit more. But the entry level for these people is getting into the gym. So it's a perfect vehicle for them. But in order to take that next step, in order to align with them, maybe they're seeking growth in other areas, they're probably going to have to step out of the zone or the communities or the groups that they're in order to do so. So that whole process in itself can actually be uncomfortable. Like our gym, I pride the community. It's fantastic. Such an aspect of the gym that makes such a difference. But, if someone is actually considering, changing the style of training or going to a different gym, often it's a really hard thing to navigate because, they're embedded in a community, they have friends, they have a social network, it's stability, it's consistent, they know the people, they enjoy the people. And it's one of those things that it's bigger than just the training in itself. So it's multifactorial here is the point that I'm trying to make. But, as you grow and develop, these values need to be looked at from a really objective lens. So today what I want to do is I want to help sort of lay out a little bit of a framework of how to identify what you want to actually get out of your training, and then put in some really practical solutions about how you kind of reverse engineer the output that you're trying to get out of it. I think that's the best way to look at it, because if you're constantly sort of going through and looking at the framework and going, okay, what do I want to be doing? Does it match up with it? What can I do to get towards it? It's a really practical and pragmatic way to look at it. So let's get into it. Now, when we look at training, it's very rare that people actually want to do anything other than look great, feel confident, in their own skin, in the things that they do so that they can show up better in life, probably create better relationships with people, and just feel good. So I think, first things first is identifying what it is you actually want from training. Is it as simple as that? Is it you just want to feel better? There is this thing in our industry where there is an illusion of weight loss and recomposition, and people's entire marketing strategy, people's entire business model is around helping people drop a certain amount of weight. Now, this is an illusion, because once you drop or gain a certain amount of weight, it doesn't mean instantly that you're going to feel better. It's a short-term, transient outcome that may provide some fulfillment, but it also may not. So I think weight loss and weight gain is actually a really transient, illusional way of looking at training. I think what we need to actually be doing is going, okay, well, if you are someone that wants that, we need to be training in a way that's building muscle mass, building strength, and working on your physique. So how are we going to facilitate that? We know that we're going to have to look at your calories. We're going to have to make sure that we have a consistent data point day in, day out, week in, week out, so that we can manage calories. If you want to go into a fat loss phase, we need to make sure that you're actually eating below what you need so that you drop weight. If you want to put on weight, we need to make sure that you're eating in a surplus. But outside of that, just putting on weight and just decreasing weight isn't enough. You want to be doing it in a way that's actually sustainable, enjoyable, and you want to do it in a way that actually keeps you healthy. It's not hard and fast. It's not some crash course 6, 8, 12-week program. We want to be doing it in a way that's helping you set up process over time. So, I think we need to be mindful that the weight loss and the weight gain thing is a bit of an illusion. I have a lot of conversations. I've even had the conversation with myself, with males, and they're like, oh, I want to get to 100. And I'm like, what does 100 mean, man? Like, I just want to feel bigger. I'm like, great. You've now just identified what it is that you actually want. You want to feel bigger. You want to feel as if you have more muscle mass. Now, the illusion here is you could drop 5 kilos or 5 kilos of body fat and not put on any weight and actually feel and get the desired outcome that you want. So the weight loss or the weight gain is just what we expect we will feel when we get there. But sometimes it actually is so far removed from it. Like, what's the end point of this? Like, the amount of people that I say, I hear say, like, I want to get to a certain body weight in terms of decreasing weight. I'm like, you're probably going to feel no different. All it means when you get to that weight is the fact that you've starved yourself. You've probably pillaged a ton of muscle mass, not enjoyed training, and you're probably going to rebound and put it all back on because it's been something that you've only been focused on the actual outcome itself, not the process, not the lifestyle, and not doing the actions daily that tick up to making you that person. Like, that's the real goal there. Now, I think, feeling confident for most people is actually one of those things it's a lot easier than you would think. When people come in, I think the easiest way to get a baseline on things and the easiest way to start from scratch is to do straight up, find maintenance in terms of calories, do a recomp and get you down to a body fat percentage that you're happy with, and then you can push the dial in either direction. Because the reality is, in most cases, people don't really want weight loss. People want to feel better in their body. So if you could get someone to drop some body fat, but also build muscle mass, if the scale weight stayed exactly the same, they've ticked all their goals and the weight hasn't changed. So the weight gain and loss is really an illusion. So I get it's an objective measure and it's a data point that people can look at. I get it from that standpoint. It's motivating, but the reality is it doesn't actually necessarily mean that if you hit this weight number that you're actually going to get the outcome you want. So I would say for you, if you want to feel more confident in your skin and you actually want to feel better, I would actually start with a recomp. Don't start with going like hard one way or the other. Find maintenance, drop down a bit of body fat, and then just create a baseline. Because I think the biggest thing here is most people do not have a baseline. So if you create a baseline, it's very easy to then move it into a direction that you want with anything in life, but particularly with training. Now, I think strength training is a really, really interesting one because a lot of people get into it where I feel like they're a little bit like, not lost, but they feel like they need some meaning, some progress in their life. It really suits people that, are kind of process-driven. They want to work towards something bigger than them, bigger than, where they currently are. And it really feeds into that whole cycle of continual improvement, forming really healthy habits, training in a way that's conducive to long-term progress. And it's such a motivating thing when you start to see all these things stack up week by week. Because really what it is, you're setting yourself up in a way, in a lifestyle that means that each week, each year, each block, everything in between is stacking wins up. So that in itself is like this really empowering process that really it changes you. It really does. It starts to show you the possibilities, because often, you think of, even just think of like Amazon, for instance. Anything you want is at your fingertips. Training is one of those things, especially strength training or building muscle mass, is one of those things that no one can do the work for you. No one can take that away from you. You have to show up, you have to do it. But the thing is here, it's the lifestyle component of it. You have to embody this lifestyle of being strong, doing the 1%ers, focus on the process to actually get the outcome. It's one of those things. So when people actually get into strength training, I often ask them like what it is. And a lot of time people are really craving like meaning and connection. And that's what they actually get from these powerlifting communities and these strength training facilities, is that it's meaning, connection, it's an outlet, it's support, it's people working towards similar goals so that, you feel like you're part of something bigger than you. So, and part of that process is the empowerment that you get through ticking your own boxes. So it's less about the absolute numbers on the bar. It's less about the absolute outcomes, and it's actually more about the process of doing that's the really transformative component of strength training. Now, I think one of the biggest things for anyone that is training and they embody this lifestyle of health and fitness is they often start to remove layers of clutter that they do not need from their life, because they're focused in on what they actually want. So when you look at training specifically, you could be a bit of a jack of all trades. It does a couple of, Pilates classes a week. You could do yoga, you could do strength training, you could do aerobic. And, I think when you identify what it is that you want in terms of your values, it's very, very easy to then start to remove things that do not serve you. Like say for instance, I wanted to really just work on building some muscle mass, but I really wanted to be at my peak aerobic fitness, and I was doing 8 hours of zone 2 work a week. It's a little bit conflicting. It doesn't mean that, your aerobic fitness and building muscle or strength can't coincide, but you probably wouldn't want the aerobic fitness to outweigh your efforts in the gym, because the amount of food that you would actually need to consume in order to keep you actually at maintenance and put on weight is huge. So, it's very easy to pull the trigger on removing components of your training program that don't serve you any longer. And I think that's actually something it's really, really important in training. When you are aligned with your values and what you actually want to get out of it, the rest becomes background noise. Like the amount of people that I've worked with that have said, oh God, I wish I started this earlier. Why didn't I start? It's so simple. It seems so simple. And I'm like, yeah, it's because it is. It's only simple because it's aligned with what you actually want and what you value. And now that you've identified it, it's very easy to go all in on it, because the training doesn't have to be complex. It just has to be specific. When it's specific and when it's aligned towards a certain area or goal, it's very easy to make very, very fast progress in this particular area, purely because you are actually aligned, and there's all the other stuff on the sidelines just gets pushed. We're like, we do not need any of that in our life at all. So I think, to wrap up this point, I think from a training standpoint, you just got to identify what it actually is that you want. And I think it's a question that people go into it with a really superficial level. I think sometimes people get into training, after an event. Maybe they've had a relationship breakup, or, I don't know, maybe they've come out of school and they've been bullied at school, or whatever the actual reason is for it. They've come into training because they essentially want to feel better. So they come in thinking that they know what's going to make them feel better. But if you don't know, you don't know. So what I would say to anyone here is, identifying what you want in terms of training is really less about, it's less about the actual outcome in terms of an objective number, like body weight or, strength or whatever it may be around that standpoint. And it's more about the person that you want to become. It's the values that you want to live by and the person that you come in the making. So, if you want to be strong, you need to train for strength. You need to focus on your recovery. You need to focus on staying mobile so that you can continue to train. You need to stack up all these habits and actually become someone, not just work towards this transient goal. Because when you embody the lifestyle of this particular said person, that's where you actually start to stack up the wins. And Progress is given at that point because you are that person. So that's the point that you want to get to. So if you're struggling or you are on the motivation sort of bandwagon around your training, taking a tiny step backwards and really figuring out what you want will be a superpower in the next stage of your training. Now when we're having a look at constructing your training program specific for your goals and your values, how do we do it? How do we even start? And I think the easiest and the most pragmatic way to look at this is, what is your time commitment that you can do every single week? How many sessions can you commit to every single week in the gym? The second is, and this is a really, really big one, what activities during your week do not serve you? Is it going out for long lunches at work? Is it having big Friday and Saturday nights? What are the activities in your life currently that derail you or would derail you from stepping into this next version of yourself? In order to really make a transformative change, a component of who you are actually needs to die. It sounds a little bit dire, but in order to move into a new era of yourself, you need to let go of some stuff. Now, if you have had a very fruitful social life, and you know that you waste a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of resource working into that lifestyle, you may actually have to make some changes as to how you go about your day to day. You may need to start saying no to things. You may need to, change your friend group. You may need to lessen the circle of people that you actually have in your direct network. They're really big considerations to think of here. When we think of your food and we think of how you eat and we think of how you recover, you need to then start to think about, how are you going to fuel yourself? Are you going to be someone that meal preps? Are you going to buy some pre-made meals? Are you going to actually start to put the effort in to aligning your food choices and your recovery choices with the person that you want to be? Now, this isn't to overwhelm anyone, but you really need to step into it. And you need to step into a new world, and you need to step up just as if you're tackling a new task, because it will very quickly become your new person. Now, if we put a practical standpoint around this, I've come from a chefing background. From chefing, I got into personal training into physio, gym ownership and stuff like that. Now, each one of those levels have taken a new version of me to step through. Moving from chefing, it was almost frowned upon to step into the gym and go train and actually do something outside of work, because it's just work, have a drink with the boys and then hang out. And you're well, no, that's actually just not that fulfilling. So in order for me to get into my new stage, I actually had to start saying no to social activities or events or activities that we had planned in the schedule that I would normally say yes to. Moving from that into becoming a personal trainer, you then have to go, wow, well, I am now a person that is meant to be embodying this life of health and fitness. So I need to be leading from the front. I need to be doing the thing. So I need to be looking after my nutrition, prepping my meals, making sure I'm hitting my calories, making sure I'm hitting my protein targets, and leading by example. But that version of me didn't exist when I was a chef. I dreamt of it, but I wasn't there. And then, you can see how this stacks up. So what I would say to you is the lowest hanging fruit for you right now is straight up identifying what you want to be, but not what you want to be, who you want to be, how you want to value yourself, and how you want to live your lifestyle. Who do you want to become? When you know who that version is, even if it's not your final version, even if it's V1, if you know that version, it's very easy to align your actions with who you want to become. If I want to have great body composition, I need to track my food. At least get a baseline of knowing how to manage food portions, how to manage calories, and how to make sure that you're getting the required amount of macronutrients in. If you want to be strong, you need to train in a way that's conducive to building strength. You need to train in a way that's progressive in nature, that's focused on technique, that knowing that there's no one session or one training block that's ever going to dictate your outcome. It's something that you need to be part of and building towards. If you want to build muscle mass, if you want to have periods of time where you're working more so on bodybuilding, you need to be okay with eating quite a lot of food, being uncomfortable because of eating food, you may even have some sleep disruption. You may even feel a little bit bloated or some issues with joint pain as you start to put on weight. But this is all part of that process. And if you align yourself with the values, you go, I know that is my value. I know that is what I value. It's very easy to then just stack up the daily tasks. And then it just becomes what you do day in and day out. It removes motivation completely. It aligns your training so it's super specific and dialed in. And then once you've gotten to the point where you're really, really happy, at that point, you know you've actually successfully ticked something off, which again is super motivating. And you can point it, you're like a loaded gun at that point. You can go in any direction. But, I think a lot of the time with training is people are trying to chew off too much at one time. They want to have the perfect composition. They want to be super jacked. They want to be lean. And instead of just going all in on one section and just winning at something first, because when you win at something first, it's very easy to start stacking up these wins. And it's super motivating. It's super encouraging because you know that if you do a certain amount of work and you do things in a conducive way, time and time again, you're going to get a result. And that there in itself really starts to flow over into all other aspects of your life. Now, I say this a lot. I'm super passionate about training, not just from a training outcome standpoint. Like, I'm a super geek on that stuff. I love programming. I love rehab. I love movement. But the flow and effect that you get from being a process-driven person in training it cannot be spoken about enough. When you win in the gym and you win at training, it sets the precedent that you are a winner. You're a person that can do things knowing delayed gratification is a thing, and it's working towards something then bigger that you're currently at. In this day and age, in this society, hard work is often something that is not seen. There are few and far between people who actually work really, really hard. It's something that I think when you train hard, no one can take that away from you and no one can do the work for you. So simply by doing that and being that person that shows up every single time really flows onto all aspects of your life. So aligning your training with your values is one of the most important things to do. Now, to wrap things up, our industry as a whole, we focus on everything. Training reps, percentages, methods, exercise selection, everything in between. We are so hyper-focused on it. But you know what? All of it is absolute nuance. If you, as a person, are not aligned with the direction that you're going, because you're going to stop training quicker than you started. And for me, I see this training process is such an empowering journey for people to be on. But you've got to make sure it fits into what you actually want, where you're actually going. You need to spend some time identifying the person that you want to become, because it's not where you currently are. It's future you. So you need to align your actions daily towards the person that you want to become in the future. Now, if you want to stay up to date with all of my podcasts and my YouTube content, below in the show notes, I have a link that will sign you up to my newsletter. I promise I will not send you any junk email, and it's going to be fully packed with great information that you can incorporate into your training, rehab, and lifestyle. Thanks for today. I'll see you guys on the next episode.